the foremost food and wine experts in the Livermore Valley, Jeremy Troupe-Masi.
Thank you, Paul. Wow, what an intro. What an intro. I'm not nervous, you are. Well, I'm happy to be here. It's taken longer than you need to know to actually get this programmed. But we did, and we're here, and I'm excited to see a full room of people. Wow. So thank you for taking some time to hang out with me. Otherwise, like I said, my name is Jeremy Troupe-Masi. Hey, Faye. And I'm a Livermore resident. I'm an East Bay local. I'm a Cali girl at heart, through and through. So, and today you get to kind of meet the maker, who I am as a business, and your neighbor ultimately, because I'm that too. So, let's dive in. Let's dive in. There it is. So first and foremost, thank you to the Livermore Public Library. Thank you to Janice back there for planting the seed and getting me in here. I regrettably or embarrassingly haven't spent much time at this library, and I'm excited to spend more time here. In signing up recently, I was reminded how all the beautiful benefits of this place. It's really wild that you can sign up for free and get as much as you. As many amenities and resources and tools at this library. So I'm looking forward to taking advantage of that as a local, and hopefully, if I don't get moved out here, maybe I can do this again. So first and foremost, thank you to the Public Library for hosting me and letting me talk my stuff. So, what are we doing tonight? The objectives is to tell you a bit about who I am, my business, and maybe I can help make you a better chef by the end of the day, or at least answer some questions and talk you through it. So here we go. And I mean, this is kind of the theme of tonight in a sense. If there was an energy, it's be daring in the kitchen. It's worked for me. Generally, people don't see your failures unless you let them. So it's a great space to create, explore, fail, triumph, and it should be used liberally, in my opinion. So go burn some toast and use the tools. So I mean, here we go. Let's start with who. So this part here is it's talking about me a little bit. To understand the business is to understand me. So again, I'm Jeremy Troupe-Masi. First of my name. Born and raised. There it is. It's live. Okay. Do I know? Do I need that? This is good. I'll do my best. So I was born and raised in the Bay Area, Fremont to be exact. I know there's a lot of Fremont transplants here in Livermore Valley. And I'm one of those, as far as when it got started, I've always kind of been a food kid. I didn't know what hospitality was as an industry. I liked food. So it's been in me for quite some time. Just fast forward to this experience part, all the way to college. Sports got me to college. I quickly learned that I wasn't the athlete I thought I was, so I dived into my academics, which I'm glad I did, and ended up getting a bachelor's in hospitality and tourism with a restaurant focus, where I would then spend the next 10 plus years working every job in the kitchen, in the front of the house, and really getting a humble look and a humble serving of what my industry had to come. And so and here we are. Paul mentioned that I'm also the director of hospitality at Darcie Kent Vineyards. That's a more recent move. I exited the restaurant industry right about the pandemic, and we'll chat a little bit about that later. But it's been a good change of pace, and has allowed me to connect with this industry, this region, in a new capacity, which has allowed me to then kind of become a sommelier in 2016 as well, which is really just a fancy French word for letting me know that I'm a poison checker. So I'm good at smelling things and tasting things and letting you know if they're going to be good. That's kind of the job of a sommelier. But in all seriousness, a sommelier is a wine professional who is otherwise an asset to restaurants to help guide people, meet people on their journey relative to purchasing wine and building beverage menus. So it's something that I still get to use while I'm at Darcie Kent Vineyards. And now I'm dealing with imposter syndrome as I work on this 4-letter word over here and becoming a chef. I'm not classically trained by any stretch, but I'm definitely the kid who liked to break down the clocks and rebuild them, so I spent a lot of time in the kitchen asking questions, signing up for jobs that I didn't, no one else really wanted to do. Just getting an understanding of something I loved and where I might fit in it. So I've spent the past 10, 11 years not as close to food, while in a restaurant, in the front of the house, which really means I'm serving and working behind a bar and working with wet ingredients more so than in the kitchen. They are the same ecosystem, but they are two different beasts for those that have any familiarity with what restaurants can be and are. And then it's the pandemic, it's this business which is reconnecting me with really what's my passion. And it's interesting, so every day is new, So that's kind of the experience. I put destruction and preservation. That's, if I had to describe the restaurant industry in 2 words, that's kind of how I wrap it up. It's beautiful chaos. It's beautiful chaos. I wouldn't be who I am without it. So who we are as a business, we're a 3-person team. It's myself, a longtime friend of mine named David Diodny, who I don't know if he has a choice. We force him to work the pop-ups with me, and my lovely wife sitting back there, Nicole and Savannah will point her out, but she won't do it. She's in the back there. She is my packaging director, my CFO, and the best underpaid employee you could have. One of the great benefits of working at JTM In The Kitchen is unlimited PTO, baby. You can use it up. But that's kind of who we are. We're a small team. We're a family. We're your locals. Like I said, we're your neighbors. And I hope, and I'm excited one day to have employees when we get there. For now, we're falling forward. We're having a good time. So that's kind of who we are. And how we are a cottage kitchen. And there's many of those here in the Livermore Valley. You probably support a few, whether you know it or not. It's a license that was adopted here in California in 2012. And it essentially allows people to use their home. An entity they're already paying for, utilizing to start a business, so that they might launch it and insert themselves in a brick and mortar fashion at some point in the future of the cities they serve. So this has allowed me to start this business out of my home, and one day we will be paying rent somewhere else. But in the meantime, it is a tremendous tool to really empower us. So if anyone was interested, that's take a note there. I'd be happy to share any details relative to how cottage operations work. If you have that urge, it's definitely, it's easier than the books, and you're already paying the rent anyway, so you might as well. So we continue. There's beautiful life there. The what, kind of, what we are. I call myself a Livermore local spice guy. Maybe others do as well. But I'm Livermore's local spice guy. So as Paul briefly mentioned, I work with a company out of the Napa Valley and Petaluma. They're called Whole Spice. And the owner's name is Shalib Madmaneh. He was born in Yemen and grew up in Israel as well, where his mother would grind spices every single day, and they had a very small, which would actually be the Yemen equivalent to a cottage operation. It was the family business, and after school he would spend time grinding spices and helping the family business. And this is a business I've worked with really longer than I've realized. I've been a fan of them since I was a teenager. You've maybe interacted with them. They have a few locations. Most notable one is at the Oxbow in the Napa Valley. And they're a name out there like the Penzies of the world that some people are familiar with. But they source me their spices whole, and then I work with them to blend them. So that's one of the things that makes my business unique is I blend spices. I don't just purchase theirs, repackage them, and sell them as salt and dill. I'm kind of making these fun blends here, which I brought a few over here today. And it's why I choose that is in my experience I've always kind of used them as a blend. I'm biracial. I am kind of a blend. So it's just blend is in my blood, and I guess that's probably to the core kind of my reflection of my business. That's me and my business there. So it's they have a unique way of communicating is what I put up here as well, a sense of place. So I think everyone in here has cooked something. We use spices. Whether you think you're a master or not, I'm no master. But I'm willing to make mistakes and screw up. And that's they have this really unique way of traveling. So relative to what inspired me to start making spices, when as a kid serving eggs with eggshells in them that were too salty. On the days I got it right, You could have the unique ability for a chicken breast to take you to the Mediterranean. You could go to Dominican Republic. You could go to New York. Spices have a very unique way, the same way that wine does, of transporting you. It might be the closest thing we have to teleportation at this point right now. So that's kind of one of the reasons. Yeah. So this is another one of those little phrases here. Tell me what you eat and I'll tell you where you're from. Nobody called my bluff on that, but it's just there's a beautiful camaraderie that can be met at a table over food relative to getting to know your neighbor. Why we are the dining table. So we kind of got into what inspired this. This woman right here, who looks like that guy, is my beautiful mother. She was responsible for most of the cooking in my home, and she let me help her, made me help her, and it stuck. It was just, I don't know. Actually, I do know. It was just, there's something that, like I mentioned, food has a way of bringing people together. I'd say that, the core memory, one of the primary core memories that I reflect on often is the power of the dinner table. I grew up in a big, wacky, beige family with, my dad's Italian from Connecticut. My mother is an African-American woman, born and raised in Berkeley. So we have every gamut, every personality, every type, every style, every shape, every color in my family. And in big families you don't always get along. But there was always one instance when I remember everything was right, and it was generally around Thanksgiving or over a meal. You get to the dinner table, we could have been wrestling in the back 5 minutes ago, but when dinner's served, shut up, hand me the dinner roll, and let's enjoy it for 15, 20 minutes together and wrap up, share a glass of wine and whatnot. So relative to core memories, the power of the dining table and community is really the fixture as I reflect on why I do this. That levels me, that grounds me. So I'm always eager in sharing that with people. And another reflection of a core memory who I am is these spices here. So fast forwarding to the pandemic. So I mentioned prior to the pandemic, I was working in restaurants and actively looking for a way out. Restaurants are it's hard work. You rebuild to get destroyed pretty much on a nightly basis. And like I said, it's beautiful chaos. It's very rewarding. You meet the best of people. My restaurant experience is exactly why I'm here. John Smuglereski, I met here at Savio probably 6-7 years ago, working the other side of the bar. He still follows me, and I follow him. So this is exactly why we do it here. I forget my man's name back here, but I know he works in the industry. So it's a great way to connect, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But the pandemic stunted our growth. I don't know, you guys remember 2020? I know some of us have tried to forget it, but it sucked. It stopped everything. And it was terrifying. And I'll tell you, in our industry, hospitality, it was scary at first, but for those that handled it right, I'd say for my group, Savannah and I, my podcast host, have talked about this, it was very important to the restaurant industry. Because it was really the first time since the 1950s that the restaurant industry has had a chance to stop in its entirety. It's otherwise been an industry that's always been forced to fall forward and recreate, and not look in the rearview mirror enough. I was listening to somebody say, the windshield's bigger than the rear view intentionally. Doesn't mean you shouldn't look back every once in a while. And this allowed the restaurant industry, in my opinion, for the owners and the businesses that took advantage of it, to really kind of lick their wounds and take a look at their business models and concepts. And I think you can see reflections of that in how we eat and what we eat. John hit me.
What happened in 1950?
So 1950, the mid-1900s is when how we ate and why we ate really changed. Coming out of the world wars, the Industrial Revolution, as far as production here in the States and whatnot, food really ramped up. And it really set the tone as far as how we eat in America. And it really just took off from there. And we've really never had a chance to slow down and just think about the industry as a whole, particularly relative to how it affected me, how we reach people. I'm taking a really big point and whittling it down to my experience in a restaurant, which is really the last touch point. But it was, so I hope that, did that answer the question somewhat?
Yeah, you took a historical fact of the war, ended it, and people were getting back to figuring out
Okay.
how good it is.
All right, thank you. So, and then, so it took me out of the industry, jumping down here between these 2 points. I was looking for a way to recreate, reconnect to the Johns of the world, and just to all the people in the world that I was able to touch relative to the hospitality industry. So I swear we'll get to spices eventually, y'all. But this is my first time really talking about the business, and understanding the business is understanding a little bit about me. So it's doing as much for me as I hope it's doing for you. So, had some time to reflect ultimately, and looked back in the rearview mirror to something that I loved, and I said, "Wow, you know what? You can't get any closer to rock bottom than this. So let's try something that maybe makes you nervous and offer the world something that's really true to you." And that was spices. From a business perspective, they're not terribly perishable, which is another plus relative to starting a food business. And then we got started working with friends and colleagues to get brands and dropping off spices here and there. Try this, don't tell me if you hate it. We found ourselves on our way to a spice business, and and here we are. We get to do beautiful things like this, thanks to ladies like that. So, and there it was, yeah. And then we started the spice line. So these were the core 5 spices that I started here. And it's been a true treat moving forward. Is anybody, so by raising hand, is anybody familiar with these ones here? At least I know we got a few back there. What's your favorite back there? What's your favorite back there? Do you have a favorite? The gentleman with in the teal shirt there? Yeah, hit it, send it, I'll take that.
Donkey kick.
Donkey kick,
I
all right.
I like it spicy. So.
All right, anybody else? Anybody else?
Everything.
Everything, all right. Well, heck yeah. So, everything bagel is the spice that got me started. Donkey cake is the bestseller that I didn't know was going to be my bestseller. It was a beautiful accident. Taco night is 33 years of Tuesdays in a jar. There's been a lot of research and development there. Keep it simple is probably the spice I use the most, and Cajun funk is definitely my favorite by far. So. But they're all just different iterations of how, extensions of how I've learned to cook in the kitchen. And hopefully we built, playful packaging with serious ingredients. So, we move on, yeah. We built ourselves a business. So, I think understanding why and what we are, and ultimately, is just understanding where we are a little bit as well. So, that's kind of that sommelier in me, is you got to talk terroir a little bit. This has everything to do with the ability for our industry to thrive and me to have a business that I do. So we're in the Livermore Valley, which is located, right over here. We're the last frontier before you go over the hill to Altamont. We have a truly rich history in agriculture and hospitality in particular. So our proximity to the Bay Area, our cool Mediterranean climate. If you've lived in California, we've all lived in California long enough, I would imagine, right? Are we all California natives for the most part? We've enjoyed this beautiful bounty for decades. If you've lived in California, you know that it's not hard to eat wonderfully here. And if you've ever traveled to New York in the winter, you might realize how you take that for granted, because it is, I dare you to find a ripe avocado in December in New York. We don't have the same problems here relative to food, and it's nice to be reminded and grounded of that every once in a while. That has everything to do with why our food scene is so prolific here, and why I chose to do business here in the Bay Area, and particularly Livermore Valley. So, going all the way back to the early 1800s, the mid 1850s, we were kind of your last and first, your first stop in, and generally your last stop out. If you were headed west or going back east, there's probably plenty of books in here telling the stories of the Mendenhalls and the Livermores of the world, but both were known to host guests regularly amongst the vineyards and the orchards and all this beautiful agriculture and ranchers. So it is ingrained in the Livermore Valley, whether you know it or not. You probably just feel it a little bit. It's something about this place. We are rooted in rich history relative to agriculture, all the way up to Pleasanton, Dublin, this entire region. It's a beautiful region. So when I thought about where I might want to do business, it just made sense here. So that is just a nod to where we are. So this is that time where I take a breath, look up, maybe have a glass of water. Any questions thus far as we kind of continue, folks? I still got you. Is anyone falling asleep on me? Okay, cool. It's working. Okay, is it working? It's working. I see smiles.
I have a question about your taco mix.
Hit me.
Rumor has it that it was for fish tacos initially, at least, or somewhere along the line, it was recommended for that.
Yes. So John's question up front was the kind of the conception of the taco night spice, which I can flip back to here. So yeah, he said. So my wife is a pescatarian. I do most of the cooking in the house, and I have no problem loving on fish. So we eat a lot of fish and vegetables in the house. So this taco night is definitely built to go well on fish-related dishes relative to taco night. It's my favorite way to use it is on a beer batch. So to answer your question, heck yeah. But it'll also do the meats. It'll do the porks. It'll do the chickens, and it'll do the ground beefs as well. So don't be bashful there. Anything else as I kind of start to hand around a few things for you? Actually, why don't we start with taco?
Jeremy,
Yes.
question. Is your spices, are they available at stores?
They definitely are. And I have a slide that I'll save till, and it goes over where you can find them. But absolutely, that has everything to do with where I'm headed and why I've been able to start a business. I brought a few spices up here for you to kind of smell if you'd like to, and hand them around the room. And then at the end of this, if you're so daring, I got some spoons here if you'd like to taste any of them as well. Just gives you just kind of invite the senses here a little bit as we continue. So I'm passing around my taco seasoning. This second one is actually a spice that I make for Amy Wingen at Wingen Bakery, and it's for her olive loaf. And it's one of my favorites, and I wish I could use it more, but it is uniquely hers. And then the last one is my Cajun seasoning. So be careful when you're smelling these. You would be surprised how quickly you will sneeze doing this. So just a little whiff goes a long way.
So this one is mainly for bread, you're saying?
This one is, it was created for bread, for her. And then it's actually, so I have another spice called East Bay Steak. And it's my gentle riff off Montreal steak. And it was built from this. That is for her olive oil there. It's built with rosemary, thyme, ginger, coriander, fennel. There's a little allspice in there, plenty of black pepper, kosher salt, and a few other things, but it's one of my favorites, and that one there is Cajun. So, any more questions? Yes, Savannah?
Do you have any holiday spices or special spices that we don't see?
So, I do have a holiday spice, and it is actually my wife's cinnamon roll, which you might as well pass around as well. And it's lovely. It is a very mellow iteration of cinnamon roll, and it uses most notably a couple different iterations of cinnamon. So I think there's really two types of cinnamon that we're most familiar with. One is called Ceylon, and it's a softer, more aromatic cinnamon. And there's the Vietnamese or Saigon cinnamon, and that's that really hot tamale, sharp cinnamon that is a little rough around the edges in my eyes. So this cinnamon blend here is Ceylon dominant because both my wife and I enjoy using this rather liberally. So it's what I call a year-round cinnamon roll, but definitely great around the holidays. It finds its way in my coffee pretty much every morning. Cinnamon rolls, overnight oats, oatmeal, cereal, things of that nature. So, and I owe that one to my wife, who is still underpaid, but I love him. So, before we continue, please.
So, a lot of times the spice blends, you mentioned Montreal steak. The first ingredient oftentimes is salt.
Yeah.
Lots of salt.
Yeah.
Which is cheap and unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I can't tell from yours,
Mm-hmm.
are you doing the same thing?
So his question had to do with Montreal steak in particular, but how I build my spices. And he mentioned, when you read the back of a label, they're generally, the first ingredient is salt. And if you've ever read a label, they are in, there you go, they're in proportional order. So salt is first, the most heavy, the dosing there. Salt is what's in there more than anything else. So to answer your question, there is only one spice, actually two spices. So my donkey kick is intentionally salt forward. It's listed as a hot salt or a finishing salt when I first made it. And my keep it simple, salt and pepper, which is very intentionally simply salt and pepper. Otherwise, the majority of my spices are paprika, and just, they're not based in salt. So, I mean, and I might have to spend some time there, because, you know, if there's something that is unique and consistent with the blends outside of a couple that are intentionally or, you know, labeled salt forward, I think it's important to salt food as you go, and especially as you finish. So while my seasonings are salted, I'd say they're thoughtfully salted. I ultimately want you to dictate that. I hope to help flavor your food. I'll let you dictate how much salt you want to use. So with that said, if you have, you know, I've still got a lot to learn relative to, you know, there's a lot of ingredients out there that tell you exactly how much salt is in there. It's crazy food algorithms that I just don't know how to use yet. So if you are, you know, if you have high cholesterol or maybe can't enjoy as much salt, I would definitely push you away from a few. But otherwise, I don't overdose in salt on my spices intentionally, because, you know, because I believe you should salt before, during, and after, which is actually going to be on another slide as well. So no, not salt dominant, really on anything.
I do have one more
Hit
question.
me.
So let's go back to Montreal steak. It's really chunky too.
Yeah.
Like coarse. A lot of the salt blends or spice blends that I get, I have to grind them through my own grinder
Yeah.
just to make it a little smaller, so
Yeah.
it's just not falling off of it.
Yeah.
Stuff like yours look like they're a little finer ground.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add on how you do that?
Yeah, I mean, so his question had to do with, you know, a lot of the spices you interact with in the markets are generally, they can be pretty hardy. And he mentioned that he has to sometimes continue to grind or mill some of the spices that he uses. And, you know, it's something that I think about, particularly my Montreal steak, my East Bay steak. It's still rather hardy, but it is, some of the ingredients, some of the more important ingredients are a bit finer. I think the chunkiest bits in there are going to be the black pepper and the rosemary, particularly because those are two of the ingredients that I've intentionally left a little hardier, because if you're using those on a steak, those are ingredients that once the others kind of dissipate and or dissolve, can help create a bark or a crust on whatever protein or veggie you might be using. So I think my spices are thoughtfully milled, but hey, I always take feedback, and I promise you they're always changing. I have recipes for these, but I will tell you everyone is slightly different, and that's actually the way I prefer it. That's actually the way I prefer it. So hopefully that answers your question. I saw one more. I'm happy to keep going. We're happy to keep answering. Let's boogie. So, you know, what the heck are spices anyway? So spices are a term used in culinary arts to describe the dried portion of a plant. And that can be anything, really, except the leaves. Leaves are, you know, then you're in the herb category, which are still in the overarching umbrella of spice, or how you might use spice, but I do think it's stems, buds, and seeds, and things of that nature, that are generally dried, milled, and served in various formats. You know, peppercorn, actually with that said, I'll just pass around peppercorn. You know, peppercorn is maybe the perfect example of that. You know, when I start my blends, it is a process of love. I start with whole ingredients, outside of a few. I start with whole ingredients that I mill and break down myself. Exactly, you know, to your question, is because there's certain densities and that I'm looking for when I'm making my spices. So this is going to be black peppercorn, or tell the cherry black peppercorn, Szechuan, be careful with that one, and red peppercorn. Just examples of, they're all peppercorns. So it's not like you probably already knew that. It's just one of those things when you see the definition, you're like, of course it is. Yeah. Otherwise, you know, for example, cinnamon is actually bark of a tree, right? Allspice are simply dried berries. Clove is an aromatic flower bud that is ultimately dried. And generally, you use it milled, and you use it to spice a soup or something of that nature. You know, we're definitely in allspice season, cinnamon season, and cardamom is a pod spice in the ginger family. So You know, I think we most commonly interact with spices in this capacity, in this ground capacity. So it's sometimes hard to, you know, what the heck are spices when they're all around all the time. They are food the same way anything else is. And you probably have more familiarity with what they actually come from, the origins of them, than you might actually, you know, think. So I guess the, you know, long and short of that is don't overthink it. If you know more about spices, then I think you give yourself, you know, credit for it. So, you know, to salt, there was already a couple good questions about salt. You know, the next couple slides really just highlight two of the most important spices in my kitchen, in my pantry, and in my blends, really. And the first is salt, with a very intentional crown there. There is no spice, there's no seasoning more important than salt. Forever and more. It is a, you know, it's flavor, it flavors food. It's used as a binder, a stabilizer. There's three primary ways that salt is made, and you can mine it, which is, you know, those hardier rock salts, the Himalayan rock salt that we all love, that pink stuff. You might have a lantern. Most common is, you know, the evaporation of salt water, which we've all seen before if you've been in Fremont, headed over the what bridge is that? The San Mateo, right? What's the? There you go. Yeah. If you've gone over the Dunbar Bridge, right on the crest of the Coyote Hills there, and salt brines, which is a bit more expensive way to do it, which is similar to the evaporation, but its starting point's a bit different. Otherwise, outside of one iteration, it all comes from the sea. So if you ever see salt that's way too expensive at the store and it's listed as sea salt, it's a marketing play. It all comes from the sea generally, so don't be tricked. But do ask questions. You know, salt it's a food preservative. Bacteria can't thrive in the presence of high amounts of it. I realize I picked the wrong color for this, but it can be used for brining, curing, pickling, salting. So, you know, salt is truly the most important spice in my kitchen that I'm really loving learning more about. You know, I would have loved to live in the days where there was a day where, you know, before proper currency, salt was the $100 bill. You'd go to a big royal dinner, and one of the ways you might show off is you'd have a pile of salt in the center of the table to flaunt your wealth. So, you know, it doesn't have the same value these days, but if you know that, I don't know, it makes you feel a little better when you're salting your eggs in the morning. It is definitely a luxury that not everyone historically has always had access to. So, you may not have the best diets, but I promise you eat better than royalty 600 years ago. So, especially if you simply source good salt. So I use predominantly, actually let's pass salt around too. I brought a couple iterations of salt. And actually I didn't bring my kosher, sorry about that. So I'm passing around what's called Malden sea salt, and two iterations of smoked sea salt. The one I forgot tonight is kosher sea salt, but these are generally the salts that I experiment with in my kitchen. That's going to be the Malden.
Malted?
The Malden. Malden's the brand. It's more of a flaked salt relative to what's on this presentation here. It's a hardier salt that you generally would use for finishing your food. And this is going to be a cherrywood smoked salt, and this is going to be a smoked Malden, which are just, they all have different smells, and you probably haven't seen too commonly, you know, salt that looks like that and shaped like that.
So what would kosher salt look like?
So kosher salt is also a flaky salt. It's a bit hardier. I mean, it's the one that sits at the top of the shelf that generally says diamond. So the table salt is that really thin stuff you get at a diner that always has rice in it. Kosher salt is like a step above that. And the reason why I've chosen to use that is relative to how it's made. While it is a bigger flake, a bigger granule of salt, the sodium in its entirety, it still has less sodium than the finer table salt, which is one of the more common salts you'll find in your McCormick's and things on the shelves and whatnot. So when you see salt listed first on the packaging, next time you're at Safeway and you're turning it around, one, salt is the most, you know, is the heaviest ingredient in that, and they're most likely using table salt because it's also the most affordable, the most widely available relative to these processes. It's the easiest to make. And, you know, all salt is beautiful, but if there was one that was least healthy for you, it would be that one. So while I'm not, you know, tracking how much salt is exactly in there relative to any dietary restrictions or medical restrictions, I use kosher salt intentionally because it has a lower sodium level than the average salt per annual, for what that's worth. It has a bigger emphasis on adding flavor to your food. So the flake salt that's going around I mean, if you ever see on my packaging, I always list that as sexy salt because it is sexy. It has these big, wonderful flakes. If you were, you know, daring enough to try a spice at the end of this, I would definitely just put one of those flakes on your tongue and let it do the magic. I primarily use it for, like I said, finishing things. I love it in dressings and whatnot. I think what I like about it is the salt dissolves a little slower. And while it is even bigger than the kosher sea salt and table sea salt, it's actually also the least salty of all of them relative to the sodium intensity. So,
So you can buy smoked salt in the store?
say it one more time.
Like smoked salt, just plain smoked salt?
Yes, ma'am.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, so I don't know how common they are in the Safeways of the world. I'm also just not, I've learned to source my spices elsewhere, but like, what's the great store? You know, you want a good smoked salt, go to Ace Hardware. Go to their barbecue section or whatever. They've got a great offering array of heartier, richer, you know, barbecue-centric kind of outdoor spices. But yeah, smoked salt is a wonderful way to add complexity to a dish with just one thing. Especially if you're a little bashful and you don't want to screw something up, throw a little smoked salt on it with your pepper and take it from there, inch by inch. I would encourage you to keep trying. That's the only way that I've gotten here. My wife back there is a beautiful critic. She is, and she lets me in. So she gets all the bad dishes, but she can attest to give it a shot, let it fly. Like I said, what happens in your kitchen stays in your kitchen unless you drop it off at your neighbor's house. So, you know, you make mistakes there and have some fun.
I thought I done some pecans or butter pecan in that last salt.
Yeah, right?
Is there some of that in there or I just?
So John got nuances of something that wasn't salt in it. He said there was this kind of cool butter pecan note in the salt. And I'm not entirely sure. If this was a glass of wine, I could probably speak to it better. But I don't know if those molecular compounds work the same way in salts. But that's what's beautiful about this stuff is, yeah, I mean, spices, they can do wonderful things to how your food tastes and whatnot. So that probably is.
It wasn't intentionally added in there, but the mixture can kind of generate something that's close to it.
Yeah, and Malden would probably have the perfect answer to that. And they say, well, we use this 3-wood blend of cherry wood and hickory. You know, they might even put pecans in it. Who knows? How they smoke it is their prerogative. But you very well may be onto something. So the moral of this slide is salt is king, salt is queen. And there are, as simple as it seems it is, there are so many ways that we are just uncovering and learning that can really expand how what you're doing in the kitchen. My man over here, my bartender friend over here, probably puts a little bit of sugar in his simple syrups. You probably use it all the time behind the bar. Can you do anything? Yeah. Actually, hit me. How do you? I mean, can you share how you use? I'm a few years removed from the bar, so how do you use salt back there? The wet ingredients.
Yeah, all terms of like if you're making a margarita, you put salt.
There you go.
Yeah. And then there's a drink that we came up with called Mama's Mocktail.
Okay.
We add Himalayan salt on the rocks with this taste.
Why do you use Himalayan versus another?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just the color and the taste of.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, well, what's that cocktail? Tell me about that cocktail. I'm interested.
Mama's cocktail. So it has pomegranate juice, lime juice,
okay.
and you top it off with the lemon lime soda.
Okay, so it's very light. It sounds really light.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, then that makes sense. I mean, so that makes sense to me. Himalayan salt is that beautiful pink. It's actually kind of light in itself, right?
Yeah. And every time you sip it, you get little crystals of the salt.
Heck yeah. So I mean, salt can be used in so many ways. So order this. That would inspire you to go support local. Happy hour starts at 4. Go get yourself a salted margarita tomorrow, y'all. And we can continue. So that's 100%. Find your local bartender and get a salted margarita. The second spice that we're all familiar with, and is the most, second most important in my kitchen, is pepper. That was the one that just went around as well. I've only brought 3 today, and there's even more than the 5 I have listed here. But generally, the same way that table salts are the most widely used form of salt in grocery store brand spices, black peppercorn or the table equivalent would be the most common used for all the reasons. It's cost effective. Telechiri is the spice that I generally use. There's green, there's white, there's sesame. They all do different things. You would otherwise recognize telechiri as black peppercorn, and that's actually, it just went around. If I didn't tell you it wasn't telechiri black peppercorn, you'd be like, that's simply just black pepper. While it looks like it, it's actually a bit softer, sweeter, and more aromatic, which is why, let's keep it simple, is definitely my most used spice that I have. The kosher sea salt is beautiful, and here's my secret recipe. It's a 60-40 blend of kosher sea salt, 40% freshly ground telechiri black peppercorn. It's wonderfully aromatic. Hey, let's just open it up, right? Let's see. Put some money where the mouth is, kid. Yeah. So it smells like pepper and salt, but it just smells a little better than that. So pepper is the second most important spice that I use when assembling my blends. And it's just a reminder that salt and pepper can work wonders in changing various dishes. So black peppercorn is probably the most common. In fact, it's not terribly profound. It tastes like pepper. Telechiri is a bit more aromatic, a bit softer, a little more sweet. I think it goes better with particularly vegetables and food that has a natural sweet affinity to it. Green peppercorns is something I'm still learning how to use, but they're fun. They're a lot more mild, and I love them in particularly Asian cuisine, cuisines from different hemispheres that are east. It just seems to love those. It has an affinity to the things that are grown there. White pepper, a little goes a long way. If you want a spice that will make you sneeze instantly, put your nose in a jar of white pepper. But it's very potent. It's very powerful. Generally also used in a lot of Asian cuisine, which is kind of my fancy. Szechuan peppercorns also went around, and those were jacking up. They have this really, really cool ability to make your mouth numb and hot at the same time. And learning how to eat Szechuan peppercorns is like learning how to snowboard. It sucks until it doesn't. And then you're just cruising down the hill and you're like, that was worth it.
So is that the red one?
So Szechuan is so that's red peppercorn there. This is actually a fruit, more than it is a peppercorn. But they all really are. But this is definitely the sweetest. Szechuan is actually not on this graphic here, but it was passed around. And it's the one that looks like it's a little more sprouted, a little more blossomed. And this is one that I'm still learning how to use. I won't pretend that I've got a lot to learn, but I generally use it in spicing my broths at this juncture. Sir?
So, a wine question related to spices.
All right.
Often, Zinfandel is often described as having a pepper kind of an aroma. And is there a particular pepper that you identify in Zinfandel? And I have an answer to my own question in a minute, but I'm just curious about it.
Yeah. So that's one of the, so I'd say, it also depends where it's coming from. Because the climate has everything to do with how the Zinfandel ultimately ripens. And that really answers the question. I'd say if I was sniffing, let's see, let me just try and answer the question. What's a Zinfandel I'm familiar with? Has anyone had Rhonda Wood's Big Wood Zinfandel down the road? You got any Wood family members? That's a pretty common Zinfandel. Tends to be on the richer side. It's definitely juicy. And if I had to say it smelled like a pepper, it probably smelled like a pepper that was a bit on the richer side, the darker side, the more savory side. Fruit always gets to a point where it stops being fruity and it ultimately tends to get more savory. So that Zinfandel to me reminds me of llama. Whereas jalapeno or Fresno red peppers are on this side of the spectrum. The richer you get, the darker you generally get. So, but I've smelt it all, and particularly Zinfandel. Zinfandel is a generous wine. How
I
about
was
you?
just curious because I've done so I've been in the wine industry for 40 years.
All right.
And I did a seminar and I had 5 different peppers
Okay.
that people smelled. and then they were smelling and tasting as Zinfandel.
Yeah.
And much to my surprise, it's hardly scientific, but there were like 18 people, and 15 of them identified it as white pepper.
As white pepper.
Yeah.
I love that. So I mean, yeah, I love that. And like, so I mean, I went vegetal, right? So peppers can be in this form. Relative to wine, I generally gravitate towards vegetal peppers first, but pepper's a pepper. Pepper's a pepper. That's so, yeah, I think you're spot on. I'd say white pepper specifically is something that I get in Cabernet Franc a bit more than I would Zinfandel. But heck yeah, I get it.
There's
It's there.
more green pepper in California.
Depends where it comes from. It depends where it comes from. The stinky ones that I like tend to be a little more white pepper. Mine can get a little barnyard, but that's just me. But pepper, here we are. And ultimately, it's also healthy for you, which is important. And it also, some of the things it does to you relative to health, benefits, it actually helps. It's a beautiful counterbalance to salt as well, because it aids in prevention of diabetes and particularly high blood pressure. So they have their own natural affinity that probably goes deeper than any of us know. It grows together, generally goes together. Not that peppercorns, never mind, I'll just keep going. So, how do we use spice? Before, during, and after, but not always. There's really no wrong answer. I hope I'm kind of suggesting that, alluding to that. Thank you guys for joining us. Take it easy. Thank you. So yeah, once you use them, the meal's preparation will largely dictate how the spice will be used. If you're making chicken, if you've got a football game coming up, Niners are playing, you're probably marinating your chicken wings or your chicken breast the night before. Thanksgiving's coming up, you're probably getting ready to make a big brine, which is just a salty, spiced solution that you use to tenderize and flavor your meat. There's many ways to spice, and there's no wrong answer. So how do you use spices? All the time, until you learn how to use them. And that is, going back to my spices here, there's another, relative to consistencies. I don't oversalt my spices because I want you to ultimately dictate how much spice you want. But one thing that I think I've considered is this process here, is how you use them. So I do believe that with my spices, you can use them at any stage in cooking. And that's not something, that's something I'm learning more about how I'm achieving them. But feedback is letting me know that it's working. So, like I said, I'm no guru. I'm just a guy who you are letting make mistakes. So thank you, and enjoying some of it too. So frequently asked questions. Storage. Do they expire? Ground versus whole. How do you know where or how to buy tools that help? So relative to storage, how many people have that beautiful, organized, so satisfying spice drawer right next to the stove? And like when you're ratatouille in there, you got the game on behind you, kicking, right? You open the drawer and you bang, bang, bang. Relative to storage, it's literally the worst place that you could put spices, even as convenient as it is. And that's just because of the temperature fluctuations, the constant moving of them, light, no light, light, no light. You do that how many times over the course of a year with that same jar of spice that's probably been in there since January. Spices are perishable. They can take wear and tear. So storage is crucial. Not everyone has the ability to build a spice pantry or whatever, but if you wanted to come away a better chef today, move your spices from next to the stove, and they will last longer, for starters. So then, sorry, don't do
I
that.
also saw somewhere that it's recommended not to pour spices over steaming food and to use a spoon. Is that an accurate advice?
Not to use spices over steaming food.
Yeah,
Moisture
like
goes
put it
into
into the bottle, so they recommend use a spoon.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So,
It's on this hot topic.
yeah, that's interesting. So I don't think you would encounter that using my spices, and that's actually intentional, because I want you. So like when you open my spices, they don't have sift tops on them. One, because they cost money, and two, ultimately, it's just in experimenting, chatting with my wife. My wife is actually at one point on the sift camp. Make it easy for people. But I think it's important, for better and for worse, for you all to engage with the spices the same way that I am when I'm experimenting with them. And I want you to touch them. I want you to feel them. And because there's no sift top, I mean, to answer the question, pouring seasonings over steam is probably the least effective way to do it. But when you don't have a steam top, like we've all seen it, right? You pour that steam top or the sift top over, the steam clumps it, and you're just sitting there like, yeah, we're not. You don't have that problem with an open top because you're either pouring it straight from the top or it's in your hand. So that's probably the worst place to season your food relative, but like I do think my spices, my jars help solve that. So it's did we answer the question? Did we get there, Savannah?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Thank
You
you.
took the scenic route. Thank you for hanging on top. So storage, move them from next to your stove if you can. Do they expire? Heck yeah, they expire. So this is a way they expire faster relative to wear and tear. But yeah, actually go ahead. I can take a break. Question?
Yeah, if you had a bulk aromatic or very volatile spice and you want to store it for a long time, would it be better to store it in the freezer?
No. The best storage for spices is a dark, cool place. A dark, cool place, almost the equivalent of a wine cellar, or something that has a consistent temperature that's moderate, not too much light on it, and has a pretty good seal. Ideally, it's whatever. Ideally, the oxygen can't interact with it, but freezing your spices, while it preserves them longer, as they defrost, you lose a lot of the essential oils, and they don't reconstitute the same way after they're rethawed that they do. So yes, it can elongate your spices, and you can use them longer, but you still you're better off using them, in their normal lifespan, which I recommend 90 days, than freezing them and trying to use them down the road. You're just better off buying smaller, which is actually one of the tips that I'll get to is how and where to buy this. Don't buy too many spices. Buy what you need. Is a great way to manage how they expire. Spices come in this size for a really good reason, because that's really all you need generally before you can go back to the store. I challenge myself to buy spices. Well, I'm a spice business, so I have plenty of spices. So, but generally, food's in my kitchen. I try not to buy too much because it's a great way to keep you grounded and spending time at your local purveyors and grocery stores and eating fresh food. So it's more of a habit change there. Buy your spices and not so much in bulk and use them more frequently. I would avoid freezing them at all costs. But screw it. It's first world problems. As long as the food tastes good, it could be worse. Ground versus whole. This is one of the, you can spend a lifetime debating this. Savannah and I maybe have talked about it on the podcast. We love going back and forth. You're going to use more ground spices than you do whole spices. Because not everyone in here has a spice business or, a 4x6 spice cabinet. We want to get our spices and we want to use them often. So, our whole spices are always the best way to start your spices. If you can toast them, if you can grind them, even if you just start with one spice you really like. I use a lot of pepper. Just start with one and start grinding it for yourself, and you'll be surprised at the quality. So I just want to make sure I do it. Wow. Time we got to an hour. Sheesh. Sorry, guys. But whole will always be better. There's nothing wrong with ground. But to the points above is, there we go, that's the cue. We're almost there, guys, we're almost there.
Don't worry, I'll plug it.
So the moral of that is, buy your spices, buy them fresh, don't buy too much of them and use them. How do you know? That's just one of those questions. Sometimes your friends are like, just how do you know? How do you know what to use? Why do you use it? And there's a slide we'll get to that will explain some of that, but just try it. That's like, just try it. Just try it. How and where to buy your spices? Buy them from me. I would love that. Otherwise, source out local purveyors. Maybe one day I hope one day that I'll have brick and mortar that you can drive a half a mile away and get all the fresh spices you need. There's no shortage of local spice purveyors. I already Whole Spice at the Oxbow ships, Penzi out of Sonoma ships. There's places in Oakland, there's places in San Francisco. You would be surprised what spices will do to your food, and they are easier to get.
And Ace Hardware.
And Ace Hardware. There we go.
Really?
Heck yeah, Ace is the place with the friendly hardware. Tools that might help, get yourself a pepper mill. That is the easiest way to buy whole peppercorns and not have to, and an easy way to grind them. Mortar and pestle if you're more of a purist, grinder, are fun tools that make it easier. So have a good, let's see, what would I? Sorry, all these things. We'll move on from that. I think we already covered that. So how do you use spices? All the time. All the time, guys. It's okay. That's okay. I gotcha. We'll keep moving. Ooh. You frozen? That's all right. How we doing, guys? I still got you? Okay, cool. Oh, we're live, I think. That was the next slide, yeah. Okay, so understanding flavor is crucial to mastering spice. So this is kind of where wine and food have merged for me. But salty, sour, bitter, sweet are the core four flavor profiles that we all are used to. Umami is one of the, is the sexy buzzword that is a little bit newer. Not too new, it's been around forever, but we've started adopting it and just using it more frequently, umami. And it's savory, right? We all know what salty is, we all know what sour is. It's lemon, it's citrus, it's bitter. We all know bitter is sweet, umami is that savory sensation, soy sauce, dashi, things of that nature. Spicy isn't technically a flavor profile, but it is something that interacts with the core 5 now flavor profile. So it's something to just be to consider. And this little cheat sheet here, you can find this anywhere. Google helped me out with this one, but understanding how they balance one another. Sweet balances sour, sour balances sweet balances spice, etc. Sour balances bitter. Understanding those combinations is going to be the easiest way to use spice. And if you were ever looking to be more creative in the kitchen, I would say remember these equations, because they really are simply math equations, and then insert spice. So if I know a spice is sweet and the other one is spicy, I may not know much about the spice. I know one is sweet and I know one is spicy. It's a great place to start. So I'd say, memorize the math equation that is in the form of a recipe, and give it a shot, give it a whirl. And the next kind of layer of added complexity is temperatures and textures, which is really more of a wine and food pairings question. For the sake of time, I'm just going to keep moving forward. Over there. Is it as simple as that? Is that the name of that? There we go. Ooh. Question? Yes?
If you could, is there a spice that would constitute like a bitter flavor?
Yeah. Yes, there is. I mean, licorice is like licorice is one of those.
Yeah, she didn't like that one.
Yeah, they don't like that. People don't use licorice too often. A licorice equivalent that you're probably more common is fennel or celery. They all constitute that similar flavor profile. Celery, it's why you add celery to stocks. It's that bitter aspect. So, I mean, there's plenty out there. And now that you ask, for whatever reason, most of them evade me immediately.
Hops. Hops.
Yeah, hops, heck yeah. For the beer drinkers, hops is that, yeah. Sir? Please.
Is there a difference between anise and fennel, the original licorice?
Anise and fennel? Yes, there is.
Anise.
Or, I want to say yes, there is. Anise, as I deal with it, if I'm ordering anise, it's usually a dried iteration, whereas fennel is the fresh produce, the vegetative. So they share that similar bitter, licorice-y profile, but they are just ultimately different products, at least how I've interacted with them.
Do you think the flavor is the same? I know the seeds don't come in different.
They're close, but they're different. They are different. And you just use them in different applications to achieve the same flavor profile. Not everything calls for raw fennel the way it might call for a dried anise. You know what I'm saying? They are the same bitter quality, but it's just, it's understanding what you're making and what it might call for. If the recipe is low and slow, you might add something heartier. If it's fast and quick, you might use something fresh, because it doesn't give you enough time to break it down. So it just depends how you're cooking.
That's the difference between ouzo and sambuca.
No, I'll meet you at happy hour tomorrow. I feel like we're getting. So that is, so again, that was a little bit on spicier. Only got a few slides left because it's 8 o'clock, and kind of getting to learn a little bit more about me as a business. Spices is, the bottom of the iceberg of what this business is becoming. But there's other ways I engage with the community, and a podcast is one of them. This actually came prior to the spices here, and it's allowed me a beautiful way to stay connected to the region. I've got my co-host back there, Savannah, aka the one and only Banana. Thanks for joining me, Savannah. No way. So it's a local podcast. It's a food and wine podcast. We're the only one in the Tri-Valley. We sit down with restaurateurs, farmers, chefs, cottage operations, a lot of people. We talk about amazing things. The next slide will show some of those guests.
You have winemakers too, don't you?
We have winemakers too, you better believe it. Our first 2 seasons are loaded with them. Otherwise, like I said, I'm your neighbor. I'm a resident as well. I'm the vice chair on the general planning committee here in the city. I'm one of the board of directors on Livermore Downtown Inc. And these are all, spices. My business is all of this. And it's a beautiful way to be able to connect and engage with the community. So I am as much spice as I am podcast, as I am your neighbor, as I am the wine guy. And I'm finding ways for them to meet in the middle a bit more. And spices has really been the glue for that. But we continue to do it. So these are a few people that you maybe recognize. On the left here is Flocka, the best tortilla chip in the region. This is Matt and Helena up top here. They're farmers out of the Sunol Ag Park. Sunol Ag Park is one of the only small parcels of land privately owned by farmers to produce food that's local and close to the source for us. If you like range life, if you like winging, if you like Sauvignon Maine, you've had some of their produce, which we'll get to that in a second. Everyone knows this guy, right? That beautiful face. That's Cheesy B down at the cheese parlor. Local cheesemonger. He is the cheese equivalent of a sommelier, just way more badass. Next to him is Christy Hootman, and next to her is Christy Hootman. She is Poppy. She has a local flower truck and is a different product, but a similar cottage operation as myself. And this is Brandon Carwell. This is the Executive Director of Innovation for the City of Livermore. So we get to have a lot of wonderful conversations that selfishly really help guide where I go with my business and keep me connected and allow me to talk about the people that help me prosper the same way. So a question earlier is, where can I find your stuff? Wing and Bakery, as I mentioned, got me started. Amy and Winging used to work with me over at Range Life, Livermore. If you haven't been, please make a reservation. This is Brian here. He worked with me behind the bar. Amy was in the kitchen. And at the time, they were also a cottage operation, making sourdough loaves and serving food to support their family over the pandemic. And in 2.5 quick, beautiful years, they were able, in less than that, they were able to open Wing and Bakery right downtown across from Local Use. And they are kicking butt. And they pressured me. They offered me. They said, if you can get a bagel blend together, we'll put you on our bagels, assuming it doesn't suck. I got my SHIT together as quick as I could and jumped on that. It's been and this has everything to do with what the business has become and couldn't do it without my team. Brandon, Cheese Parlor, you can find my spices here. For the folks that came from Pleasanton, you can find me at Jean's Finds Foods. Grounded Livermore, Livermore Butcher Shop, Purple Orchid, New Tradition Kitchen. The list is growing. I hope to be Livermore Spice Guy for a while here. So trying not to be hard to find. And in the center here is, the flywheel. We are some of our parts. That is true with any industry, but especially here. At the core of what Livermore is the rich history in agriculture and hospitality. It continues to work that way. It's still a small industry. It's always a small world. And when you buy my spices, you're supporting not only the cheese parlor, if you buy it from there, you're supporting me, you're supporting Whole Spice, and all the above. It's a beautiful ecosystem that is really unique to our region. Craft production is, it doesn't hit like it does here in Livermore or anywhere else in the Bay Area, I promise you that. So we're going to kind of wrap it up. So, who the heck am I? What is the business and how can I support? Come hang out at local farmers markets and pop-ups, whether I'm there or not, because like I said, we're all on the same team. You can find me, this Saturday at Flocka's. for a beautiful pop-up. If you have kids, the Grinch will be there around 12 p.m. to take pictures and whatnot. It's going to be a good time. It's a free event. You get to support local. Shop local, all those places that we just listed here and beyond. The reservation at Rings, I go immediately, and we all follow the podcast. Listen to your favorite person who maybe is on there. I'm going to get Faith out for next year, if she'll have me. But we'd love to keep, hanging out with our locals here. Eat local, drink local, live local has kind of become the motto. And it's something that I think, it's all captured there. It can mean whatever it needs to for you, but generally the closer it is to you, the better it is for you. And that's kind of what that is in a nutshell. And I'm your neighbor, trying to do good with you and for you. So that is kind of who I am in a nutshell as a business. So with that said, I thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Wow.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all for coming.
And feel free to come take a look at the spices and maybe ask, talk to Jeremy over here.
And before, while I still have your attention real quick, for those that are joining me today, there'll be, so my website, I have a few business